This Warlock build that I predicted to be the meta is even more powerful than I thought now that we're actually in Season 23 and able to take it for a spin. I've adjusted some of the fragments and a little bit of the playstyle that I'm utilizing with it. With the adjustments that I've made, you now have basically Vex Mythoclast, which is firing like a heavy ammo weapon. Literally, the linear fusion rifle mode does more damage than heavy linear fusion rifles, and you have infinite ammo. And on top of that, if that wasn't enticing enough, you also are going to have God mode with infinite restoration ×2 because of how powerful Vex Mythoclast is. The gameplay behind me here you can see is the Lost Sector. I was 18-14 for that. I was 16 levels underpowered, and yet I was still able to run through the champs, run through the entire activity effortlessly, and I'm going to break down the exact build and how I was able to do so. So first up, obviously with Warlock, we're going Dawnblade. We're going to be using Well of Radiance, and then next up we're going to use Phoenix Dive for the class ability. This is really important because this is what's actually going to give us restoration ×2. We'll get to that in just a moment. Burst Glide doesn't really matter, but that's the best one. We're going to use Incinerator Snap. This is the stronger melee in PvE. However, if you are using torches, sometimes you can use Celestial Fire so that we can get Radiant from a distance. But for this build, we're using Incinerator Snap, but it doesn't really tie into what we're doing here. We're literally just trying to get restoration ×2 and spam Vex Mythoclast to just completely obliterate all enemies in front of us. And then we have Healing Grenade as the grenade of choice. You don't necessarily have to do this because we're going to be eating our grenade. We're going to consume our grenade. Don't necessarily need to use Healing Grenade, but just in case, if you're in a pinch and you have to throw a grenade at your feet, you might as well have a healing grenade there for you. Alternatively, you could use Firebolt Grenade, which has a 1 minute and 4 second cooldown versus the 1 minute 31 second cooldown of Healing Grenade. So keep that in mind. But if you do play it right, it doesn't really matter the grenade cooldown because you're gonna have restoration ×2 for the rest of the activity because you can get your timer up to 12 seconds, and we'll go over that in just a moment. For the solar aspect, first one we're going with is Icarus Dash. This doesn't really add anything to the build. There's really only two aspects here to use, and the main one is going to be Icarus Dash and then Heat Rises. Icarus Dash can be nice to get yourself out of a pinch though. While Heat Rise is active, you have an additional dodge. We're not jumping in the air and dodging with this though. That's not going to help much. And then while airborne, rapidly defeating targets with your super or weapons cures you. We're also just really not jumping in the air. If you jump in the air, enemies are just going to shoot you out of the air. They're going to be able to target you much better. So we're staying on the ground. We're not really utilizing any of the effects of that. But Heat Rises is definitely the one to use right here. This is super, super strong. Consume your grenade and you gain Heat Rises. And then what you do after you've consumed your grenade, you're going to then use your Phoenix Dive, which is going to give you that restoration ×2. And that's that restoration ×2 that is extremely powerful and basically God mode. It's much, much stronger than restoration ×1, but we do alternatively have a restoration ×1 infinite loop with this build. So you do have some heals alternatively. If you don't have restoration ×2, you'll just basically always have at least restoration ×1. So let's go ahead and jump into why that is. So the first fragment that we should mention is Ember of Empyrean, which is going to be your solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration. So once you get restoration ×2 by consuming your grenade and then using your Phoenix Dive, you'll then use the Vex Mythoclast and clear all of the enemies in front of you, which is going to proc Ember of Empyrean and extend that timer. And the timer can actually go up. It goes up every 4 seconds for every kill you get. It can go up to plus 12 seconds. So once it's at 12 seconds, you're good. Like nothing's gonna really kill you. I mean, unless like 10 powerful enemies jump on you at the same time, you'll die. But for the most part, restoration ×2 is just so powerful. It's gonna be really, really strong. You're gonna feel like you have God mode. And then one other part that's really nice with this is that we have Ember of Solace, which is radiant and restoration effects applied to you have an increased duration. So initially when you get restoration ×2, it'll actually have a really short window of time. That's why we put on Solace, so that way you don't potentially lose it because you have to get that kill. You obviously have to consume your grenade and do the dodge, and then you have to immediately get a Vex Mythoclast kill, preferably on a red bar enemy or a weakened enemy, one that you can kill almost instantaneously because the timer is so short. But thankfully we have Solace on, so that way that extends that initial timer, making it much easier to get that 12-second maximum cap that you're going to reach as you get a ton of Vex Mythoclast kills, as you can see in the gameplay behind me here. Now alternatively, if you don't have your restoration ×2, we'll talk about the second part that we're doing here, which is Ember of Tempering. So while Ember of Tempering is active, your weapons have increased airborne effectiveness and your solar weapon final blows create a fire sprite. So what happens with this is the first kill you get with the Vex Mythoclast will proc Ember of Tempering. Once that is procced, you'll actually get an increase to recovery, which is nice. The main point you're looking for with this is the ability to create a fire sprite, which will happen when you get the second kill with the Vex Mythoclast. You'll create the fire sprite and then you can pick it up, and then due to the next fragment we have Ember of Mercy. Picking up that fire sprite will then give you restoration, but keep in mind that's just restoration ×1. ×1 is not nearly God mode. ×2 is God mode. ×1 is just decent heals going on, right? So keep that in mind. We've got basically two forms of healing with this entire build and this entire loadout. So that's the gameplay loop for constant heals and constant health regeneration. Now we're gonna go through the weapons. What you use in your kinetic or your power weapon don't really matter too much. For the Lost Sector, obviously I just had to fight Unstoppables and Overloads. That's why I had the Chocolate Fusion and then the Rocket with Overload Rocket this season. But the Vex Mythoclast was really the winner there. Thing is just so strong. Now we go through all the mods on the Warlock armor. We're gonna have Solar Siphon. This is gonna be the most important one. The other mods don't really matter too much, don't really lean into the build or make the gameplay loop any stronger, but we're gonna get Rapid Solar Weapon Final Blows, and that will create an Orb of Power, which will be very good for us. It'll actually self-buff with the boots. We'll get to that in just a moment. Onto the gauntlets. We don't have anything that really loops into the gameplay too much. We will have Solar Loader, just so that way we can reload that Vex a little bit faster, and then Impact Induction, causing damage with a powered melee, reduces your grenade cooldown, which can be nice, so that way you can get back to Restoration ×2 in case you run out, or if you need to panic and throw a healing grenade at your feet, you'll be able to get that grenade back by just using your melees, and that will give you a little bit more grenade energy. Onto the chest piece, doesn't really matter, you can pick anything. I just went Arc, Solar, and Void, just for most basic activities, just pick whichever you need. Now onto the boots. Rain of Fire is the key that actually gives you Radiant, and this is going to obviously buff the Vex Mythoclast in and of itself because it is a fusion rifle, even though it operates kind of like an auto rifle. Instead, all you have to do is get one kill, and then you immediately have Radiant. And once you have Radiant, you'll then do plus 10% more damage with your Vex Mythoclast. And on top of that, once you get a kill or a couple kills with your Vex Mythoclast, you'll proc Solar Siphon, which will create an orb for you. And by picking up that orb, you'll then get double Solar Weapon Surge. So you'll get the added bonus of the Vex buff that happened just this season. Bungie buffed it. It does 200% more damage to champions with that linear fusion rifle mode. You'll notice that I can 2-tap an unstoppable champion. That's why it's so strong. Plus we're getting the Solar Weapon Surge, double Solar Weapon Surge buff right here. And on top of that, we have Radiant. So that's why this thing is just so unbelievably strong. And in this activity, the Lost Sector, you can see here, there's also Solar Weapon Surge. So it can just absolutely melting through everything. For the third mod here, we have Recuperation. This is just a mod I use on pretty much every build. So that way we have added survivability. Picking up that orb that we create from all those Vex kills will give us a little bit of chunk of health. And then moving on down to the last one now, we're going to have Bomber, which is whenever we do use our class ability, our Phoenix Dive that is, you'll get a little bit of grenade energy. And on top of that, Powerful Attraction will pick up those orbs that you create with your Vex nearby, and then Time Dilation, so that way when we are doing big damage with the Vex, we get that extended time and it doesn't decay as fast. That'll keep the uptime for the Vex doing really powerful damage with your Solar Surges even longer, which is why this is very essential to this build. For the stats, for mobility, you don't need any mobility for this at all. I have literally 10 mobility, doesn't matter. You will want 100 resilience because of course we're going to take this into challenging end game content. And then recovery can be nice, but I don't really care too much for it. I ended up with 70 just due to my armor. And then discipline will always be huge, so we'll go with 100 discipline. And then intellect doesn't matter nearly as much, so we got 20 there. And then we have 40 strength as well. And so as long as you have 100 resilience, 100 discipline, you should be good. The other stats don't matter too much. Now let's look at the artifact for this season. Of course, we have the mods that make this stuff even more powerful that I haven't even unlocked yet. We have Rays of Precision, which is while Radiant, Solar Precision Final Blows cause combatants to ignite. This will obviously be absolutely busted with Vex Mythoclast and Rain of Fire if you think about it. I'll get one Vex kill, which will instantly give me Radiant, and then my Solar Precision Final Blows will ignite enemies. So basically Vex will be igniting every single enemy in front of me. So if you thought the gameplay behind me in this Lost Sector was good now, can you imagine when every single thing ignites that I shoot with a precision hit? That's going to be crazy. That's going to be really strong. All the champions igniting, all the Screebs, all the enemies scoring, everything igniting. Once that gets unlocked, it's going to be very strong, even stronger than you've already seen behind you. And then we have Revitalizing Blast, causing damage with a solar ability. Weakens champions and bosses for short duration. So what you could use for this is actually your melee. If you're able to get closer to them and actually use an Incendiary Snap, that will help. If not, you could actually alternatively use Celestial Fire so that we can throw it at a distance, and then you'll actually end up debuffing the enemy there. Because the terminology says weakens, it actually debuffs for 15%. Keep that in mind that other things in the game can debuff even further, like 30%. But that's really nice, especially free for just using your solar abilities. So keep that in mind. If you want to play a little bit more at range, you could definitely use Celestial Fire for this build and it'll be very strong. Then the other mods for this season, we do have Heart of the Flame as well, which is casting your solar super grants nearby allies radiant and increases the damage of your super for each nearby ally. I don't know if this actually works with 12 radiance, but if it does, that would be just absolutely wild. I mean, obviously when I get more artifact unlocks, I'm going to select it either way because I want to give all of my teammates radiant, so it's already going to be a mod that I'm going to use. But if it actually works with the well, that's going to be very strong. We'll have to test that out. And we have Flint Striker, Rapid Solar Weapon Precision Hits, and Rapid Solar Weapon Final Blows grant radiant, which is nice. Obviously we're going to be using our Vex and spamming it a ton, and because we have Rain of Fire, we're already going to get radiant, so this doesn't actually help our build that we're using right here, but you might as well have it on. And I can't think of any other mods that I would use anyways. And then for the last 2 mods, we obviously have this one here, which will help for putting on Harmonic Siphon on the helmet instead of Solar Siphon, because I have this and that only takes 1 energy. And then the last one is Kindling Trigger. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants, which can help with getting those ignitions. They're definitely a part of the build. The most interesting one though that we're definitely looking to get is Razor Precision. Once this bad boy's unlocked, it's game over. It's GG's after that point, because that's going to make this build just absolutely busted. Can't wait to see how strong that is and how powerful that is. But this is the build for Season 23 for Solar Warlocks out there. This is super fun, very, very strong and potent, and you can see what it looks like in a Lost Sector. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Click on the screen here to watch another video from the channel. If you enjoyed, smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Later. And if you're feeling thirsty out there, make sure to use code LUCKY10P to save some money on G Fuel. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitch and Kick. I go live all the time playing Destiny 2. Lastly, make sure you're following me on X, Instagram, and TikTok, where I deliver Destiny 2 news to you daily. I appreciate all the followers out there.